I call this meeting to order and welcome to the Tuesday, June 28th informational meeting here at the Carnegie Town Hall. Our first order of business is just a quick report on our land use committee. And after a call to order and approval of minutes, we had a great presentation by Shannon Verhey on general conditions presentation updates regarding our city contracts. And while, as I mentioned to Shannon, it might not be the most glamorous of topics, it certainly was a very necessary one, and they did a very thorough job, and Shannon especially did a very thorough job of covering that. Then we had some open discussion followed by adjournment. Anything else that any other member of the Land Use Committee would like to add to that? Okay, hearing none, then we can move on to City Council open discussion. Any items for open discussion?
Yes. Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
One of the things, and I know we discussed this earlier today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the operations committee and the way it's being used. I'm concerned that the meeting is held in private and other council members aren't allowed to visit as part of that. I know there are some things that include personnel items and things, but I think the role of the committee is expanded, and if we're going to expand the role of the committee, I think it's one of those things that we need to do the business of that group in a public forum, just like we do with other committees that we have. We've brought forward some proposals that I think would be worthy of discussion maybe during this time or in the form of another committee where we're allowed to, the entire council is allowed to be part of that. I know that there are times where we have brought things forward from that group, but at the same time, I think there are times where other councilors want to be part of that and we'd be in violation of open meeting laws because there would be more than 4 people. And I understand that, but it's a real goal of mine to make sure that we're doing the public's business in public. I think that meeting, at least at minimum, needs to be noticed, just like any other committee meeting or this informational or our normal council meeting. So I think it's something that is worthy of some further discussion.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Erpenbach.
Thanks. Thanks, Councilor SIRE. I appreciate that, and I had heard inklings of this. I just wanted to give a little bit of history about the Operations Committee and where it came from and what it does, and just to make sure, I don't want to sound like I'm anti-open meeting, but I want you to understand what this group is about. And so certainly it could be a public noticed meeting. It could meet in this room, and it could be on, we could turn on the cameras. But generally what the Operations Committee does is internal stuff. It's all staff related, it's all strategy related, and it would all qualify for executive session. So we have this open meeting, we notice it here, turn on the TV cameras, have the people come in. 30 seconds later, you go into executive session, you kick everybody out, turn the TV cameras off, and close the doors. Because it is that kind of committee. And I just wanted to read to you some of the notes from that original group. Those of you that were around at that time know that there were some, when this group was organized, when the Operations Committee was created, there were some heavy burdens on leadership in the City Council, and the idea was to spread out those burdens so that those issues of personnel issues in particular could be handled by more than just 2 council members. And so I just wanted to read from some of the notes of the original sort of planning committee. It was just kind of an ad hoc group that got together and sort of laid out what do we think we need as a city council, how do we lead our own organization, and there were 4 city council members that were on that group at that time about 5 years ago. The notes from that just in part say most nonprofit organizations use some kind of operations committee concept to help ensure the work of the group continues between board meetings. This proposal to add the operations committee does not take away any of the council's traditional power to act as the policy-making and legislative branch of city government. Rather, the role of the operations committee would be to actively advocate for the council's ongoing needs, to make it as effective as possible while spreading some of the roles of leadership over a broader cross-section of the council. And then I would just remind folks that the Operations Committee, its main role is to oversee staff in terms of the city clerk and the legislative operations manager and the work that those people do. It is not some sort of secret organization that's meeting without anyone else. In fact, if you read through the policies for the City Council, you'll see that Operations Committee can't do anything on its own. All of its recommendations have to go to the full council. You know, if we're going to do any kind of, if it were reprimands or raises or whatever it is for staff members, and those of you that haven't been here, except for a few months, you don't know how we do that yet. But all of those things have to go to the full council. It is only a group that just kind of advises the rest of the council, but it was built as that idea of spreading out some of the weight, some of the burden, and I thank our leadership now, because I, at that time, was either chair or vice chair, I don't recall which. It's a big time commitment. There's a ton of demands on your personal time and your abilities to do the job. To put that committee in place changed the role of leadership, and it made it a stronger leadership, and it has made the council a stronger council because of that. And so certainly we can talk about those other proposals, but I just really want you to understand that this wasn't something that was pulled out of the air, that it really was in response to a deep need to support our leadership in a better way.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Staley.
Well, I had a conversation this morning and just now before this meeting with Greg Jameson, who told me that he was involved with creating the Operations Committee.
He was.
And he said the original intent was to handle minor housekeeping issues behind the scenes. And that he said that he understood the intent that if there was any major issue, that it would be brought out for public discussion.
And it absolutely.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
And so, as we are just getting into this, those of us who are new here, we know that you just met, and I've been given different versions of how this information gets dispersed to us. We would like to know exactly what was discussed in those meetings. We want to be a part of the decisions that are being made in those meetings, so that nothing is just handed to us and said, this is how it's going to be. And we think the public has a right to know what's being discussed as well. So moving forward, I think that needs to be clarified for all of us.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Mr. Chair, I just am reading literally off of our own manual that you were handed in your training as a city council member. I am just reading literally out of that policy of the city council. And it really does talk about analyzing and making recommendations to the full council regarding operating policies and procedures of the council, providing continuity of council advocacy through this body's normal transitions of leadership and membership. No power in this committee, no power to act on behalf of the city council without first consulting with the full council. This group oversees annual review process for staff members reporting to the committee with input from all council members, updates and maintains council staff job descriptions, all executive session material, establishes guidelines in the council procedures manual to help staff members balance the workload created by individual council members, meets at least quarterly. And yes, Councilor Jameson was part of that committee. It was an ad hoc committee that was created in a time of turmoil in our staff and on our council as a whole. And there were 4 council members that were involved with that. We met to review everything about how this body works, everything about what it's like to change leadership, everything about what it means when 3 or 4 or 5 of us are gone in an election year and more people have to come in. There has to be some sort of continuity. You cannot lead a community if you're just randomly ad hoc throwing things out there every now and then. There has to be a policy so that we really do treat everyone fairly and so that leadership doesn't get beat to shreds because they happen to be the ones that we elected. And so that's where it came from. Again, not making it up. It is in your policy manual. We can certainly talk about it, make changes, but I just want you to understand there's history to this.
Okay, very good.
I'd like an opportunity to respond, since she got 2 times, please.
One more.
I'm not saying that there isn't a validity to this group. I'm just saying that they did meet 2 weeks ago. I think we would like a report on what was discussed, and we'd like to have a voice in what was discussed. That's all I'm asking for. We have not had that yet. We've got part of it, but I emailed Councilor Kiley about that yesterday. I'd like to have it all written down as to what was discussed and how we're moving forward with that.
Yes, Councilor Neisser.
I would just say, as somebody who is now on the committee, I think it would be a little troublesome if it was an open meeting. You're just batting around ideas, and so I think that's an issue. I think maybe where the point of maybe confusion or where we could use some help just as new counselors, honestly, is when we do devise a policy, and we're talking about something that might be a little more external, you know, like for public input or things like that, not the internal minutia. When it says consulting with the rest of the council, I guess where we're confused is, what does that mean? Does that mean that it's just an email? Does that mean that we're going to vote on each of these things? How do we, quote unquote, consult and come to consensus, and what should be voted on, what shouldn't? And so I think that's where the struggle is coming for, and it's a fair question, and it's something I'm not even sure about, so.
Thank you very much. And, yeah.
Sorry, I'm not accusing anyone of a conspiracy. That was never the point of what I was trying to make. But, Counselor, you sent us an email of the decisions that were made by the committee. I mean, it was a major decision that I don't necessarily, a recommendation of where this policy is going to go. But where's the next step from that? That's just the policy is going to go into effect if we don't talk about it. And it certainly wasn't something that would be discussed in an executive session about who attends the directors' meetings on Friday afternoon. And this is a major change, and we haven't had a policy, and I appreciate that we're trying to cement those things. But, you know, there was also discussion of changes to public input, which again needs to be part of a chance for all of us to be part of that. And yes, it is a recommendation, but again, that's not an executive session topic. I think public input is one of the basic rights the citizens of Sioux Falls enjoy and use on a regular basis. And in the short time I've been here, have gotten a lot of good suggestions from people who take time out of their busy lives to come before us. There's some times where it goes a little longer than I want, but that's part of the legislative process.
Okay, thank you. And to end the discussion on this topic, I would just say that again, what was sent out to you were recommendations coming out of your operations. They were not decisions that were made for the council. And those are, and one of the items that was discussed was what is the proper form for us to have this sort of discussion, because it is difficult for us to get together as a body to have that. And so we're having that today. And we will not make, I will not make decisions on behalf of the council, and nor will the operations committee make decisions. That's never been our intention. And so hopefully the clarification is helpful. And there will be other items. There were other items discussed, but we haven't finalized those items yet. Therefore, you did not receive a report on those. Some of those will eventually end up in an informational. So anything that we deem that should be public information, anything that is public information will be presented to the public. It's not going to happen behind closed doors. Okay. Any other items for discussion? Okay, seeing none, then we are up for our one and only presentation today, the 2017 and 2021 Capital Program presentation by Mayor Mike T. Huther. Welcome, Mayor.
Council Vice Chair, thank you, and fellow councilors, thank you as well for the opportunity. And maybe just to kick it off, just kind of give you a flavor, especially with the new council. This capital program, it's recommendations. You certainly have the ability to change things that you see within here, provide input, and we'll certainly enjoy that over the journey. And speaking of that journey, there have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours that have already been put into this, and this started months and months ago. So what you're going to see today is that recommended capital program, not only by me, but especially the City of Sioux Falls team. And with that in mind, let's get started. First of all, I just want to give you a little history in terms of the capital investments that we've made, at least since I've been your mayor. And you can see it has been up and down. If you look at the 2013 and 2014 numbers, that does include our new event center. And then if you look at 2015, as you would expect, that includes our indoor aquatic center. Over the last 6 years, we certainly have had an intense infrastructure investments. And I'm going to talk about that more and more over the slides to come. However, there's been no doubt there's been a very, very heavy infusion of quality of life investments as well. I want to take you through the top 10 investments since 2010. Again, just to kind of give you some perspective. We entered the ring flat out swinging and have not let up since when it came to repairing the intercore roads here in the city of Sioux Falls. One thing was certain then, and it is certain now, as long as I'm your mayor, we're not going to be building a lot of bridges or roads to nowhere. And I think that this first slide shows us that. $271 million has been spent on street reconstruction alone, and that does make it the #1 investment since I've been blessed to be your mayor. It's not just been infrastructure, though. Of course, as you know, we've tackled some long-awaited dreams over the last 6 years. Working together, we accomplished 2 of the monsters, and the biggest one was the $117 million investment in the Denny Sanford Premier Center, and the one that will be opening soon is that $24 million Midco Aquatic Center. Then back, #4, we kind of go back into infrastructure again. You know, road certainly is that foundation that I talk a lot about, but sewer, water, flood control, those mechanisms have also been large investments, and you can see that as it is the 4th largest investment we've made. Now, again, though, rounding out that top 10, I'm going to take you back into those quality of life investments that you know, we've made on behalf of the citizens. #5 was the River Greenway, and almost $10 million invested there. #6, the Great Plains Zoo improvements. That's Sanford Sports Complex, which is part of that sports and entertainment district, rounded up #7. #8, that Prairie West Library in that expanding area of town that so many people are enjoying out west. That bike trail, that renovation, that expansion, it has never been stronger, and I think the folks that were enjoying it on Friday and Saturday and Sunday, I think they would reiterate that. And then, yes, rounding out that top 10 was almost a $3 million investment in the Arboretum. May sound a little flabbergasting to you, but Sioux Falls, we have spent more than $200 million in quality of life since 2010. In fact, $211.7 million in quality of life. Those top 10 investments in quality of life are up in front of you. But again, I don't think anyone would argue that it's been an important part of this journey over the last 6 years. However, if there's a theme of the presentation today, it is this. I personally would like us to kind of go out as your mayor. I'd like to kind of go out the way that we came in back in 2010 and back in 2011. And this capital presentation will reflect that and more. I'm actually going to show you a slide from my very, very first capital presentation, and it seems like yesterday, but it was on June 28th in 2010. And you'll see these words, "The message was loud and clear," back in 2010. Well, folks, I think much of that rally call remains the same 6 years later. You know, those fundamentals of providing a solid foundation for our citizens. And yes, don't forget our city employees too. That foundation, that rally call is still loud and clear. And it remains the same today. This next slide, it's almost kind of scary in terms of how much of a mirror image this capital program is in terms of 2018, which will be, God willing, my last year as your mayor. But it is truly a mirror image of what it looked like back in 2010. And this is truly, this slide alone is going to give you a sneak peek of what's to come in the slides. I mean, look at this. Streets and utilities, 89% of the budget back in 10, 86% of the budget in terms of recommended for 2018. Quality of life, very, very similar. And then that other category, again, very, very similar. Again, trying to go out the way that we came in. Let's talk about this capital program that I am recommending, or that our team is recommending. Here it is, folks. Councilor Erickson, in full transparency, this will be the largest recommended CIP program in Sioux Falls history. Not trying to cheer it on or at the same time make light of it, but in full transparency, it is. It is the largest. In 2017, we're recommending that we spend $127 million in capital, and then over the next 5 years, almost $600 million, $589.2 million in capital and equipment. So, let's talk about where does the money come from that pays for this critical stuff? Where does it come from? Really, it's two sources. And sales tax revenues are certainly one of them, the main one. 45% of that $589 million comes from sales tax. But also, especially new counselors, remember this. In this capital program is where the utilities lie as well. So those user fees also go to paying much of the expense or much of the infrastructure. And almost a quarter of our capital program is funded by these user fees. And then again, where do we spend it? Simply put, if you look at the pie diagram in front of you, we kind of talked about it, that boring foundation, those fundamentals. It is highways and streets, about 42%, and utilities, about 32%. It's kind of interesting. I know that it gets a lot of attention, but really, if you look at this capital program, really only about 7% is of these capital dollars are really put towards culture and recreation. Now, let's go back to those basics. Back to that, that original slide that I had back in 2010, and then again, I'm bringing it up again today. 3 words. I don't know how many thousands of times I've talked about them over the last 6 years, but I'm going to use them again today. Repair, rebuild, and replace. I'm going to show you on the next 2 slides, counselors, basically 2 different ways to kind of lay out the capital program, not only past, but also the future. And I took this on to 2018. Again, not to minimize the plan in those later years, but I think that you're going to find as a council, you're going to pay probably even more attention to the next 2 years, because that's going to impact the citizens even more. So because it is so soon. The first one I'm going to show you is done in a percentage format. And again, you're going to see, again, that mirror image of 10 to 18 in terms of how they lay out in terms of streets and utilities, quality of life, and that other category. But one thing, too, just to maybe help you also understand, especially those new counselors, if you're questioning 15 and 16 and 17, that other category, the other category in 15 is the rail yard redevelopment, okay? If you're taking notes, that'll give you some indication there. And then in 17, the reason that other category is so large is we are, again, proposing or recommending that we build that parking ramp downtown. The next slide is basically, it's the same slide, council, and people of Sioux Falls, but what it does is it provides you those dollar amounts in terms of so that you can compare and contrast how we spent money in 10 and in 18 and in other years as well. Again, just to kind of give you some perspective in terms of where we've been and maybe more importantly, where we're going. It's no doubt that, again, in this plan, this recommended plan over the next 5 years, streets and utilities are our number one priority. And yes, Mark Cotter is probably the most excited about this plan. And but I'll tell you, I'm cheering it on too, and I think that you will be too. But you are going to see the bulk of the dollars. They are going to go into that streets and utilities. And so let's talk about that a little bit. Again, you've got the book in front of you. And I don't know if one of you would be willing to show that book to the people of Sioux Falls. Councilor Starr, thank you. It is a monster. And good luck reading it tonight because you won't be able to do it. But it is a monster. There's so much detail in there. And councilors, as much as I would love to go through all the detail with you today, it's just not a prudent use of your time. But I do want to kind of give you a glimpse or a flavor for what you're going to find inside. Okay? So let's do that. Street maintenance, that repair, that rebuild is a big piece of the pie. I mean, get a flavor for this. 840 blocks of roads are going to be repaired in 2017 alone. Yep, orange barrels are out in full force in 16, and they're going to be out in an even grander way in 17 if this plan is approved by you folks. Major street construction. There are some biggies here. There are, and the one that probably has garnered the most attention from the people of Sioux Falls and certainly the council, and yes, the media and the visitors to our great city has been Louise Avenue. Well, we are going to tackle that in full force in 2017, but there's some other ones as well. Madison Street and 18, and then yes, Minnesota Avenue is recommended for a major street reconstruction in 2020. We spent some money to try to become more objective in the way that we do road repair, road maintenance, and where we spend that very, very important taxpayer dollar. No doubt, there was some subjectivity in the past. It wasn't meant to provide any favors or to make anybody mad. But Chad and Mark and team, they did their best to try to outline where those road dollars should go. We did complete this IMS study, and my goodness, it's a great investment, very, very prudent one. And I want you to get a flavor, and I think that this shows it. In this plan that's in front of you today, okay, look at the IMS target that they recommended that we utilize in terms of maintenance dollars and reconstruction dollars for the city of Sioux Falls, okay? Folks, you wanted an objective study. You got it. And guess what? We're recommending that we follow it in 2017. We actually did this on purpose. You see the $11.4 million and the $7.3 million in terms of that target? Well, in this plan, you're going to see that that's what we're proposing, okay? And there's a reason why. Only 4% of the roads in our city, as identified by this study, fall into what's called a backlogged category, or a poor or very poor category, compared to their 12% recommended target, or what they're seeing across the nation. We have pretty high expectations in this town. And if any of you want to be the mayor someday, get ready, because you've got to meet them. Well, even though we are doing better than most across the country, with only 4% of our roads backlogged, that's where we'd kind of like to stay. We do. And because, here's the deal. Even though 96% of our roads fall into a better category than that, guess what? If you're one of the neighbors, or if you're one of the neighborhoods that has one of those poor or very poor roads, guess what? They're saying, hey, Mayor, when's it our turn? When are we going to get ours repaired? And here's what you can tell them, and here's what I will tell them, in this plan, much of that backlog will be fixed within the next 5 years. It's part of the plan. And just for giggles, if you're taking notes, that backlog, it equates to about 31 miles of roads, okay? Again, arterial street expansion. I took a lot of heat when I was first elected mayor. I did, because one of the first things that I had recommended was to move dollars from the expansion, that arterial road funding, and I wanted to move it into repairing and replacing the inner core roads of our town. Well, it's no secret. Sioux Falls is growing, and it's going to continue to grow. And that's why these expansion dollars, to keep up or stay one step ahead of that growth, is important. And you'll see where those dollars are going. In the outskirts of our town, Marion Road to I-90, 69th and Western are just two of the biggies that we're going to tackle in 2017. And thanks for the smile, Councilor Neitzer. We're coming to an area near you, and it's needed. Utilities. Thanks for leading, City Council. Thank you. Thank you. You were prudent. You have been responsible, and you have actually led. Thank goodness you did that, because in this city of Sioux Falls, we want to lead. We want to invest appropriately. We want to stay ahead of the next, potential sewage line collapse. We care about not only what's above the ground, but we care even more about what's below the ground. Those sanitary sewer lines, those water lines, those electrical things, those things that are so necessary. And here was the challenge. These utilities, they are so unbelievably expensive, and you actually have to pay for them. You do. And over the last 6 years, this city council, some of the members which are here today and others that are no longer serving, they've had the guts to make the tough decision, to lead and to make these investments. In this one, we're going to continue on with that, and ultimately we need to do that. This infrastructure is supported by the users. Those folks that are using these utilities, they're paying for it. And again, I just want to thank you again for the recent 3-year rates that were adopted by the City Council. I'm proud of you. The plan, again, it's a monster book. There's so much in there. And again, there are actually some changes or some revisions or some recommendations that we've put forth. Again, Councilor Starr, in the effort of transparency, I want to tell you about what I think are the biggest changes that you're going to see in this capital plan. Okay? Here we go. Number one, the revenue projections that we put forth in this plan, they are more cautious. And even though these tax revenues are growing slower than what we had calculated in the past, my goodness gracious, there's not another city in the country who wouldn't, change places with Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Very, very envious of our growth rate. We purposely are adjusting the revenue projections to, again, remain cautious, to remain prudent in comparison to the historical growth that we've had in the past. And you'll see that reflected in a 4% growth projection in 2016 and 17, and a 5% 18 through 21. Now remember what I just said. That was a 4% growth rate year over year, okay? It's not a decline. No sky is falling. That is growth. And again, there's not a city in America that wouldn't love to have that cautious and prudent growth projection that is in your presentation. Number two. Again, I know Mark Cotter's cheering, and so am I, but you're going to see there is going to be a heavier investment. There will be 165 more blocks of road repair in this plan than we had in the plan that we presented last year. Again, we want to get into those neighborhoods. We want to repair and replace as much as we possibly can, and so you're going to see, again, a heavier investment in streets. In the original plan of last year, when it came to water reclamation, we had planned on spending about $105 million in that 5-year plan last year. This year, we upped the ante a little bit. We did. Maybe not a little bit, $10 million more will be invested in repairing and rebuilding utility infrastructure. It's a lot of money, but we think it's, again, well worth it. The River Greenway Phase 3. I don't know if there's been many folks who have probably cheered on the River Greenway than me. Again, Cindy, Kylie, and I moved here from San Antonio, and we saw the grand things that were done there, and certainly we wanted to make that happen here in Sioux Falls as well, and with the help of the council and the citizens of Sioux Falls, we've done that. We still want to do that even more so in the years to come. We think that there's even more potential with that River Greenway. Here's the deal, though. We don't want to just do the River Greenway and then later on come back and have these developments happen afterwards and then redo the whole dang thing. It's not a prudent use of your dollars. It's not an appropriate thing to do. So what we want to do is we want to work with the council. We want to work with these visionaries. We want to work with these private developers and try to create opportunities together. And that includes potentially even funding these opportunities in partnership. And so, one of the things that we're even looking is maybe even doing some short-term borrowing as we do that. We just wanted some flexibility when it came to Phase 3, Phase 4, Phase 5 of the River Greenway. And this will allow us that flexibility to do just that. Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to stop investing in downtown. And I think we've done so much with our downtown. If you look at the monster infusion of dollars that we put into our downtown in prior years, infrastructure has been a big deal. Not only all over Sioux Falls, but in our downtown too. And one of the things a new council that is really probably important to understand is that, again, these aren't exact numbers, but if you take a block of downtown roadway, it costs you about 10 times more than a block of roadway outside of downtown. So these investments, they are very, very expensive. But I think as you can see with our downtown, maybe one of the hottest in America, it's important. And we've invested $13 million alone in just infrastructure in our downtown since I've been blessed to be your mayor. That River Greenway, Phase 1, Phase 2 that we talked about, another $9 million. The main library and Falls Park. So when you look at it, again, there's been some very, very strong dollars invested in downtown. And oh my, no one's going to argue. It's made a pretty incredible difference. But there is more to come. There is. What I consider, the potential event center for our downtown is soon to come, again, with the council's approval. And that is the Levitt Pavilion. We're hoping to break ground in 2018 with your support and in partnership with the Levitt Foundation and other good stewards and leaders right here in Sioux Falls. We will ultimately make a $4.4 million an additional investment in our downtown. I mean, imagine this, 50 free events where anybody can go and enjoy our vibrant downtown. And and really take advantage of all the good things that are going there. Also want to talk about another important topic of this presentation and of this plan. We would like to build a new fire station. We would. We're recommending that we do that in 2019. Here's the challenge with fire stations, okay? We're cheering them on. We're making them happen. However, one thing that you learn quickly with a fire station is not only do you build it, but then you have to operate it with these women and these men that are serving us at the highest level. So one of the things that we would like to do is actually do a study in terms of where are we at with fire here in the city of Sioux Falls. How are we doing? We just built Station 11, Councilor Neitzert, out in your area of town. We think it's a prudent investment. However, before we make that next investment, we want to understand what is the right thing to do, as well as evaluate the current fire stations that we have here as well to maximize their use and its potential here in the city of Sioux Falls. The mixed-use parking ramp, one thing that is clear, and you're going to see it on the budget, and again, in the spirit of transparency, okay, the investment in the parking ramp is a more expensive investment than you saw in last year's plan. It's now projected to be at $17.9 million, okay? So it's more money going towards this investment. Councilor Erickson has been heavily involved in this. She knows the intricacies of it. But again, we still think it's a critical need for our city. We want to get it constructed in terms of 2017. But again, in the full transparency, it is more expensive, and this plan reflects that. One thing that never changes in the city of Sioux Falls, no matter who the council is, no matter who the mayor is, and no matter who is living here, one thing that never changes in Sioux Falls is how we manage debt. If you look at the total outstanding debt that we have at least planned or recommending for the city council and for the citizens of Sioux Falls, you are going to see that we do manage debt in a pretty grand way. We are in terms of planned investment, the city services building, the parking ramp, more utility infrastructure, primarily water reclamation, and others are within this plan. However, also please be aware, we're paying off this debt year after year. About over $25 million in principal is paid off each year. And again, no matter who the mayor has been, no matter who that council has been, one thing that has never wavered as well is our bond rating. And why is that? I mean, look at the debt, look at the per capita debt that we have in comparison to peer cities. Right now, you can see we're near the bottom in terms of how we compare for debt against other cities that are pretty similar to ours. I mean, look at Fargo. They've got almost $5,000 in debt per person. In Sioux Falls right now, we've got about $2,000 in debt per person. We're still prudent. We're still cautious. We're still getting things done, and we're still way below our peers. Now, even if we include the proposed city services building, the parking ramp, and other things, even with that, our per capita debt, when you compare it to these other cities, and if you'd write this down, I'd appreciate it, will be $2,239. Again, we're not spending willy-nilly in Sioux Falls. You won't allow us to. And the citizens of Sioux Falls won't allow us to either. But we still have to tackle these fundamental investments in the city of Sioux Falls. And with your help, we'll do just that. Before I'm almost done, our bond rating that we're so proud of is a Moody's bond rating of AA2. There's 22 possible ratings on this scale, 22. There's only 2 that can go any higher than what we've got here in the city of Sioux Falls. There's not many cities across America that have a bond rating of AA2. Well, Council and people of Sioux Falls, again, it was a back to basics presentation. Again, maybe to summarize, the investments that we've made over the years that are paying off in a grand way. Our economy is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, in America. Flat out. It is still booming. It's still going strong. However, we are doing some things to bring us back to those fundamentals. Our quality of life, because of the investments that we've made over the last 6 years, they've never been better. The quality of life has never been better in the city. Our foundation is rock solid. However, as you all know, there's more work to do. There is. And that's what we are hired to do. That's what we're elected to do. And certainly that's what the city employees are paid to do. We are going to proceed with prudence and caution as we do that. But this proposed capital program will tackle our city's greatest challenges and opportunities head on. And I'm going to leave you one last thought. Sioux Falls, I think I've just presented to you maybe our most boring capital plan to date. But I hope you appreciate it, and I hope you value it as much as the city team that helped build it, as much as they do, and as much as I do. Councilors and citizens of Sioux Falls, I want to thank you for your trust, and yes, your confidence too. Council Vice Chair Kiley, thank you very much for the opportunity. Councilors, thank you for the opportunity, and I encourage all of you, make it a great day. Thank you, Council Chair, Vice Chair.
Mayor Huther, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And councilors, especially new councilors, it was just 2 years ago that Councilor Erickson and myself were in your seats and kind of out of the frying pan and into the fire sort of situation, and that's the position you find yourself now. There's a lot of information to dive in here. And then about a month from now, we'll be getting the budget address as well. And also then shortly after that, we will have a number of public hearings on all of these topics. So I would encourage you between now and that time to thoroughly go through the book and analyze it. And if you have questions, bring them forward. I would suggest first to Dave Bixler, our budget analyst, who can give you good recommendations. If you'd like to make further contact on the administration side, Dave can direct you in that in the proper direction. So I guess we have our work cut out. This meeting is adjourned.